All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast presented by our good friends over at ScentLock. I've got an exciting episode today. A man who goes by many names, the bone collector, Rue Rue Riley. You might know him as Michael Waddell. Guys, it's a fantastic conversation. Michael is just a fun guy. I've got to know Michael really well over the last few years, and it's always a good time talking to him. We get into some deep stuff about getting people involved in hunting and moral compasses and how to go about casting your idea for morals onto the next generation of hunting. Guys, it's a phenomenal episode. We also dive into some funny stuff about how the name Rue Rue Riley and that alternate personality came about. Guys, it's a good episode. Stay tuned in right here as we have the conversation with the bone collector, Michael Waddell.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Guys, my goal is to never be the next, mountain athlete that's constantly training and who's the most jacked guy you've ever seen. And they say, you got to be this way to hunt. That's not my goal. My goal is to be the most successful hunter that I can be. And I found out in 2018 that involves working out. I went on a Western hunt and I got my tail kicked. And I decided in that moment that I would never let my physical abilities stop me from being successful while hunting. And so I got home and I got to work, losing about 50 pounds. I then met one of my mentors, Harvey Ebers, who is 82 years old, and he still crushes it while he's hunting. And when I asked him what he attributes that to, he quickly said, resistance training. Because he's still at age 82, resistance trains, and he does that so that he can continue to hunt. And so, guys, I'm a firm believer in training to be a better hunter. That doesn't mean, again, that I'm going out and running a marathon a day. That doesn't mean that I spend 4 hours in the gym a day. I train so I can be a better hunter. I quickly fell in love with a product called Ready Nutrients. Ready Nutrients is built by outdoorsmen for outdoorsmen. And what this is going to do is it's going to create opportunities for me to be the best in the gym and get the most out of the gym that I can, so that I can then in turn be the best in the woods and on the mountain. So guys, if you do any kind of training whatsoever, and if you're a hunter, again, I encourage you to do some sort of training, even if it's mobility training, even if it's just a little bit of shoulder work, knee work, ankle work, just to stay healthy and fluid for the mountain. But if you do any kind of training, I would highly encourage you to check out Ready Nutrients at liveready.com. Whether you're looking for a pre-workout to get the most out of the gym, whether you're looking at their BCAAs and hydration blends to recover on the mountain, whether you're looking to get better sleep so that you can, again, be better on the mountain. All of these things were brought to mind because they were built, again, to help you perform in the woods. So guys, I would highly encourage you to check out Ready Nutrients at liveready.com. So the next time that you hit the mountains, you will be ready. All right, Michael. Well, man, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I am excited for today's conversation. I wanted to just start by saying this. When you get into this industry and you start talking with other people, usually somebody has something negative to say. They're like, oh, that guy, man, dude, I've never one time had anybody say one thing negative about Michael Waddell. And so
holy cow, man.
that's
That's
off
awesome.
to you, man.
Well,
So,
thanks for sharing that.
yeah, man, absolutely. Last year when we had you at Pope and Young convention, usually some people come out and they're like, well, man, I just don't know about, and we never had one negative word said about you. So that's just a testament to how you do things, man. So I'm excited to have you on and talk about hunting with you.
Well, thank you, man. And that makes me feel really good, because I've always tried to be as honest and transparent on my take on things in the industry, organizations, companies,
Yeah.
so So I've always kind of tried to not necessarily be an industry kind of guy. I've always kind of thought of myself as a consumer, somebody who buys the products, even though I have been very blessed to have partners and, make a living inevitably in the hunting industry, especially in the media and television area, promoting hunting and a lot of products and organizations. Um, I've always kind of felt like this kid. So I've always kind of felt like I'm an inside outsider. So to hear that, not negative has been said makes me feel good, because sometimes I feel like I say too much and I'm too opinionated, but I say it with passion. I do. I say it with passion. And so I certainly don't mind anybody critiquing me, because I think constructive criticism does us all good. That's why we got great products, is because people have always, come out with something and they're like, you know what, it's good, but not satisfied. They need to be better. And I think that's the evolution of any
Yeah.
great industry. Personalities, companies, organizations become better, and you only become better with constructive criticism and critique. So,
Well, and that's what, I've had this conversation with a lot of people. Because inevitably you get that question, well, how do I make a living in the outdoor industry? Well, first off, just meet some of the right people. But, I just tell everybody, I'm like, you have to be genuine, because it's a small
yeah,
industry. And if you start screwing people over, other people figure out about it quick. It's not, word
yeah,
gets around fast. And so, those guys who have been doing it and doing it well forever, your Chuck Adams and your Jack Frost and those guys who have been in the industry forever, they're doing it right, or they wouldn't be in the industry anymore. And
that's
so,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, and another thing, Dylan, too, is I think what I've learned is, obviously, I think most everybody with a good soul and heart, you aim to do things right, period. However, everybody's going to make a mistake. You're going to make choices that are not perfect. Sometimes your opinions that you make can change based on more intel and information. But I think those names, like you just named, even when they have been wrong, they have admitted, and they've had,
yeah,
enough security and manhood about them to say, hey, man, I did this or I did that. I was wrong. I still stand behind this, and this is my actions. This is how I pursue things, and this is how I feel. However, like, I've certainly made mistakes. Everybody can make mistakes, but you can own up to those mistakes. It's like, dude, that was a screw up. Whether it's just pulling a shot on an animal. I mean, I watch outdoor television sometimes, and people hit a deer square in the butt or right in the gut, and they're like, oh, it's angling up in there. I think I got heart. Like, no, there's no way. It's like, I don't know what it is in a man that struggles to say that, hey, I was wrong. We all know everybody aims to do right, I would think. I mean, there are some evil out there that they're going into it to manipulate and do wrong. But, I'd say 98% of the people, in our industry and most in the country are aiming to do right. But knowing that you did screw up, being able to admit that's also a big testament to being a man, or, and or a woman.
yeah. Well, it all comes down to pride, man. I mean, we're so
Yeah.
full of pride that we can't say, crap, dude, I should have taken the shot, or, I shouldn't have done what I did. And I apologize. And that's why, I had a guy, that when I got my wife into archery, the bow tech / coach that was helping us get her set up, he's like, man, dude, she's going to make you mad because she's going to outshoot you. And I'm like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? And he's like, well, women don't have pride like we do. So, like, if you tell her, hey, drop that elbow a little bit or whatever you're telling her, she's just going to immediately do it. Whereas you try to fight yourself because you're so full of pride. And
Yes.
I'm like, oh,
Yes.
whatever, man. And then she gets shooting and I'm like, crap, she's punching X's and she's been shooting for 20 minutes. Like, well, because they take criticism. They take, oh, maybe I am doing that wrong. Let me try it your way. Whereas dudes, man, we don't want to ever admit maybe your way's a little better than mine.
Yes. I think that is a trait that's kind of not necessarily good in a lot of us men. And matter of fact, I think it's why YouTube has done so well. I remember, as prime example, Dylan, I had a social media, kind of our marketing guy, social media. I had killed some turkeys one morning here in Georgia, and I just went and hunted by myself, and this has been many, many years ago. And anyway, he said, hey, man, could you breast those turkeys out, or breast one of those turkeys out, like a little how to? And I said, dude, there ain't nobody wants to know how to breast a turkey out. There ain't no man. All the men in turkey hunt, they know how to breast a turkey. That's a very simple chore. And then And then I kind of argued with him a little bit, and I finally did it. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't long. That thing, 800, 900,000, nearly a million views on how to breast out a turkey. One of the
Wow.
simplest. And so what hit me was exactly what you're saying. That's a man's way. I can't think of any man that I've turkey hunted with, rookie and or a veteran, who said, "Hey, Waddell, show me how to breast that turkey out." And it hit me, just like me. I've been down tuning my kid's carburetor, like on his pit bike, trying to get it running right and trying to get the right exhaust valve settings and intake set. I mean, and so literally, I've been on YouTube all morning just trying to research it. And now, certainly, I don't have an ego. If I had a mechanic that I wouldn't interrupted his time to ask him what he thought I would have, and I certainly quizzed my dad on it. But it kind of proves that there's a lot of things we don't know that we've researched, some very simple things. And I think you're right. I think sometimes that those that are easiest to be taught or will listen or ask questions learn quick. And even when you started talking, you was talking about Jack Frost and Chuck Adams. Man, the first few times I had a chance to be in a room with those guys, probably a negative they would have said is like, that Waddell won't quit asking me questions about what they're doing, how they're setting up, how they're hunting. I was like so eager. And at that point, when I finally had a chance to hang with those guys, I had been able to bow hunt some pretty amazing places with some amazing people. But I thought, man, here's my chance with the OGs. Man, I'm going to get all the information I can. Or I could have walked in the room and said, "Hey, I'm equal to these guys." But see, I don't ever think that I'm equal to those type of characters. I always think that they're above me to a degree, and I respect what they've accomplished. And even though I don't get to see them all the time, there's still so much more I can learn from them. And I've also learned, even the people who watch our shows, we can learn so much from one another. So those with an open mind that will listen, especially when it comes to archery, from broadheads to whether it's fixed mechanicals, whether it's a certain cam of a bow, a brace height, when you dig into the technical applications, man, all you got to do is open your ears and listen. And if you don't have that pride to pretend like you know it all, because most of us don't, and then you'll be amazed at what you can learn. But those who just pretend they know it, but they don't know, they never learn anything, and they don't improve at all on being a hunter or archer for sure. If we look at just this specific situation of talking archery.
Well, and that's what I was talking with. I don't know if you've got to see his deer yet, but his name's Bode Gardner. And he was awarded the Ishii Award this year, and killed a mule deer. I don't remember the score, but in velvet, typical mule deer, I think like 218 or something. Just an incredible deer. And you think like, the dude's got it down, and he's got like 3 of the top 5 mule deer, just a hunting machine. And I mentioned just this little thing, like I don't even remember what it was, and he was like, "Are you serious? I've never even thought of that before." And I was just like, "Well, that's like we've been doing that down south since I was a kid." Well, I told him about milkweed. That's what it was. I said, "Dude, if you use milkweed as a wind indicator, you can watch it forever." And he was like, "Dude, I've never even thought of that. That's an incredible idea." And just that one little thing, I'm like, here's a guy that kills world records, and he was incredibly open and honest about, dude, that's a great tip. I've never thought about that. And if more hunters would just be that way, man, we'd be a lot better off for sure.
No doubt. And really that is, I think that's what can make you such an amazing hunter, is when you're in camp with so many different people. And sometimes the tips might not be very technical. They could be in a way that you can do away with any anxiety, and you can learn to relax while in camp and not put so much pressure on necessarily having to, release an arrow or be successful in the field. And so you start realizing some people have an ability to just be in camp and to make the camp more fun, period, to where it takes the edge off, and you forget that you even are in pursuit at a level to where that's the only thing that means something, meaning that campfire, that food that you're eating. Somebody is always having a couple too many beers and just making everybody die laughing. Some people don't have to have any adult beverage, and they're just, naturally funny. So I've learned.
All right. So which one of the bone collector crew is the cut up of the camp?
Dude, that's the problem. All of us, we're all special ed. Yeah, we're all special ed. I mean, literally, Nick Munt, honest to goodness, is probably the funniest dude that I've ever met. Now, he's gotten married, he's got kids, he's gotten way more serious. And we call him a game hog, because we have to remind Nick that it ain't all about just trying to kill something, even though we all want to get something, fill a tag, especially when we worked hard to draw these certain tags. It took us years. But dude, he is like Jim Carrey, and he literally just didn't give a crap about nothing other than just having a good time. So there was a time, and there's still spontaneous opportunity when Nick's in camp, dude, you are laughing so hard that you can't breathe. And of course, T-Bone's consistently just down to earth funny. But we got a crew of people we travel with now, and even some of the people we've hunted with, some of these celebrities and mainstream personalities. Oh my God, man, Dylan, they're so funny. And I think for me, that's the joy of being around them. But I think it gets back to that number one thing you said earlier. It gets back to security. Those real funny guys they don't mind being laughed at. They don't mind picking on people, but they also don't mind being picked on. And so it just takes that edge off. It's not like a bunch of guys flexing and, we're rubbing themselves down with Vaseline and taking a picture for Instagram. This is just a bunch of dudes having a good time and laughing their butt off. And that's what I'm drawn to a lot more now. And then the process of hanging with those type people that obviously know their craft of hunting. If you can punch some tags and get some pretty solid animals that maybe you can get excited about calling Pope and Young and, seeing if you want to register them, that's when you've had a good camp. That's an amazing experience. And that's the adventures I'm after, for sure, is the adventure of all of those things. And one of those things can actually help make it good. But when you got them all, dude, it's adventure of a lifetime. And when you map them out like that, you won't have an adventure of a lifetime. You'll have many adventures in your lifetime.
Yeah. Who's the favorite celebrity you've ever hunted with?
Man, it's hard to say. I would say Blake Shelton, but Blake for sure, because he's such a true great hunter. He really is somebody who has studied, who has lived it, who loves it. Obviously, he has certainly used his personality, his musical ability to transform his personality into something that the whole world knows. But when you get past that, he is really just a country boy in Oklahoma that has desired to own a ranch, which he does now, that he loves to hunt. He loves to fish, but he's old school in that way when it comes to just simple things of putting minnow baskets in a creek to figure out what type of, little creek chubs he's got in the creek. So he's very fascinated with wildlife and everything. So he's on the edge of environmentalist of looking into all this, but he still loves it. But he likes a good time, and he's so secure. He's so funny that you just forget that you're hunting. And that's what I love about Blake. And so that's a guy that I've known when he just come on the country music scene, that we met through another mutual friend, Red Akins. And he has not changed at all. His checking account has changed, but he inevitably has not. So he's probably the number one guy that consistently. But even this year, man, Dylan, we've done a lot. Like I had a chance to take Caleb Presley hunting the Barstool Sports. I took Theo Vaughn hunting, which was a blast, man. Great people.
That would have been a riot, I bet.
Yeah, that was, man. Them dudes, they grew up in the city, and they grew up in an area around culture that never really got them into the culture of hunting. So
yeah,
for them, it was a big risk, and just seeing if they would enjoy it. And it also was something that they didn't know enough about to truly respect at the level of what they were getting into. But so they had a good.
Was it a turkey hunt?
It was a turkey hunt. We originally was going to go deer hunting this past October here in Georgia at my place, but Caleb got really sick and actually went to the hospital, so they had to cancel that. So we ended up getting a turkey hunt on the books, and they went and hunted Osceola turkeys. And Caleb got one. Theo did not. But you're talking about a camp, man. Funny, dude. You literally, and the week before that, I was with Jim Brewer, the comedian that was on Saturday Night Live, that was on, all those movies that we all like. And dude, I laughed so hard at those guys. And for me, it was really special too to be able to introduce them to our culture of hunting, not necessarily archery, but it was an opportunity to say, hey, this is hunting. And ironically, as we get caught up in trophies, those guys were more interested in learning the craft of just being an outdoorsman because, of everything going on, in the country. They're not vegetarian. So they're thinking, well, what if the grocery stores clothes, where do we get our meat? And we're men, and we know nothing about hunting. And so Jim Brewer especially was more fascinated with understanding kind of the food chain. And so growing up, around those big stars and being a big star like in LA and around Saturday Night Live, he was an alien to this, but he was smart enough to know that he wants to learn. So he wasn't trying to kill the biggest turkey or the biggest animal. He was just wanting to learn, hey, I can eat this now. Like, how many can you kill? And if I shoot them, I can eat them. How do you skin them? How do you cook them? So he was asking questions that no fellow hunter would really ask. He had zero pride in trying to figure it out. He was like us trying to figure out what fork to put beside the right, salad plate, and do we stir our tea with this one if we were in some nice castle or so. So that was really cool, and I was very flattered that they gave me an opportunity to take them on that first experience. So I knew they had enough respect for me to say, hey, we're gonna let Michael show us kind of the ropes in this. And so I was very honored to do that, and it was a good takeaway, and very good to meet those guys.
And it's those types of guys that are gonna learn, and they're gonna learn fast because there's no pride. They put it aside. They ask questions. They want to grow. They want to know. They want to. I mean, they're not gonna say, "Well, I don't want to ask that question because I'm gonna look like a dork." Like they just want to know, so they're gonna ask. And
Yep.
I've already said, we're talking about sharing camp and putting the pride aside and saying, hey, you know more than I do. Teach me. This December, I get to share camp with Chuck Adams. And I've already told him, I'm like, bro, listen, it ain't sitting around playing poker. It's me asking you a whole bunch of questions to try to pick your brain as much as I can. And, but that's what it takes to continue to grow, to not say, oh man, dude, yeah, I've made it. But to say, hey, listen, how do you do this? How do you approach this situation? Lay out a map and say, hey, this is my lease. Where would you hunt and how would you hunt it? How would you access it? How would you get in? And I mean, to ask those types of questions, man, that's how we grow as hunters, and that's how we continue to excel. So put the pride aside and ask questions.
There is absolutely no doubt that that's the case. And there's so much to learn from. And you're right. I think you and I talked about it when I had a chance to come to the Pope and Young convention. You and I were talking, and Chuck Adams is definitely probably one of the most, as a hunter, as a bow hunter, especially him. Obviously, Fred Bear. You see Bear Archery in the background. Fred Bear, Chuck Adams, and Chuck's humble enough that he wouldn't even really want to put himself right there with Fred Bear. But I do see them as equals in a lot of ways. Chuck, obviously his pursuit and his discipline to do what he wanted to do. And obviously everybody said, well, Chuck Adam had a great life. Chuck was very focused on what he wanted. And so it was really interesting when I had a chance to talk with Chuck, how dedicated he was. Almost in one way, some might say he was selfish in his pursuit, but I think he was unselfish in the fact that he knew that selfishly this was his goal. So he didn't bring along a lot of other things, example, like wives and a bunch of kids and stuff like that. It's funny. I now have slowed down a little bit in my pursuit and adventures. So I finally got me 2 little squirrel dogs. People ask me like, Waddell, do you not like dogs? Like, I love dogs. I'm just gone all the time. It'd be the most unfair thing for me to have dogs and put them in a kennel and come back at the end of fall and say, hey,
yeah,
I hope y'all are eating. So I think Chuck did that in life. He focused on that Grand Slam. He focused on being a better writer. And so, anyway, legendary. And so when you start looking at somebody like Chuck, and then you compare to the Fred Bear, for me, I'm always trying to think of what would Fred Bear do? We always say, what would Jesus do? Which I think is one of the best sayings ever. I think if we reminded of that, we quickly will probably look at our anger, look at everything different before we react. But I also think all the time, what would Fred Bear do? What would Chuck do? I think about, Fred's especially a lot, because even as I talk about the Theo Vaughns and the Jim Brewers, well, sometimes you might get a little criticism because people might say, well, Waddell just wants to hunt with these celebrities. Waddell just wants to be able to name drop. Well, I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't flattered to hunt with the Blake Sheltons, the Theos, and I could go on with a bunch of names. I've had a chance to hang out and hunt with, some of the Motley Crue guys, Vince Neil and all those guys. I mean, those are people you would never think about hunting. But then I start thinking about Fred Bear. One of my favorite shows right now that I watch with my kids is the Dukes of Hazzard. Another great show, movie is Deliverance. with Burt
Yeah.
Reynolds. And if you look back, or Rambo, but when you look back into history of that, guess who showed them how to shoot a bow? It was Fred Bear.
Yeah.
So Fred was one of the first guys that was really instrumental in being on set to show continuity and how a bow should be shot, whether it was John Snyder playing Bo Duke, or Tom Wopat, in Dukes of Hazzard, or Burt Reynolds in Deliverance, Sylvester Stallone and Rambo. So think about that. So I always think about, when I have this opportunity to take a Theo, maybe a Vince Neil, like, well, what would Fred do? I think Fred would bring them to camp. I think Fred would show them part of what he loved and what he knows that many of us as fans and consumers love. So for me, I'm definitely, I guess I'm comparing myself to what would Fred do, and I answer myself by those. And Chuck's very much the same way. And you're going to find, when you hang with Chuck, what an incredible humility that he has in telling you about all his adventure. He don't add a lot of drama to it. And I think these days there's a lot of these personalities that add so much drama. You'll think it's a near-death experience to hunt a turkey in Nebraska. Chuck is not. Chuck has killed brown bear. He's killed Cape buffalo. He's killed some of the most dangerous game. And he takes such a small, simple approach to telling you these stories. He'll tell you when it was scary, and he'll tell you about the hairy times, but he'll tell you stories that you think are going to be added to and over dramatized, and he's not. And so I just respect that. So that lets you know he's not a bullshitter in that regard. And I don't know. I love Chuck. I love Fred Bear, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people like that. So that's why I speak so much on them.
Well, and one thing that I think about when you talk about getting people involved in hunting, and, I'm not even talking about quote unquote celebrities. You think about,
Yeah.
dude, I had a neighborhood kid who came by and he's like, man, it's so cool when I see you shooting your bow. And I'm like, well, I have a couple little kids' bows if you'd like to try it. But man, when you think about it, you're like, what if this is the next Fred Bear right here? What if this is the next Chuck Adams? And
Yes.
I've got the chance to teach them how to hunt. And so, and again, it's not a pride thing, but then it's like, man, think about if in 50 years, this kid's receiving awards for new world records and the Super Slam or whatever it might be. And it's because I poured into him. It's because I was willing to put the pride aside and say, hey, little boy, would you like to learn how to shoot a bow? Not just my own kids, or not just, but anybody. Like, what if they could be the next revolutionary, life-changing hunter? And I had the chance to pour into them.
What you said, Dylan, was so important. And I'll reemphasize life-changing, because that's what it is. Even the story of Pope and Young, when they were intrigued by what Ishi and the way he lived his life as people, especially on this podcast listening, can correct me quicker, but it was my understanding, in reading, some of the journals and writings of Pope and Young, that Ishi inevitably was a patient. And so when they learned, oh my God, this dude is pretty darn cool, this Ishi knows things that we haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
They got into hunting. And inevitably, that's what Ishi did. He was that guy that you can be to that young man in your neighborhood that you're teaching to shoot a bow. And so that is where it's at. And that gets into some of the politics of hunting now that really frustrate me. There is a movement, to a degree, it's a minority, that basically don't want any hunter recruitment because they're worried about, the game. They're more environmentalist type of people that don't want a certain tactic done. They don't want a certain bow used. And they're certainly against a lot of things. And I understand a lot of that. But however, I don't look at, first of all, the value of human life and my fellow man is strong. Meaning, what I do know in my journey of the things that I've been through mentally, physically, but physical is not as a big a deal as mentally, because even if you go through something physically, if you can mentally handle what you're going through, you can go through it and get to the other side. But mentally, when people are down, they're depressed, and they don't see no end in sight, that's when really bad things happen. And that's when people fall into inevitably the pits of hell. And so for me, hunting is that magical drug that you can get somebody introduced to. So yes, even if somebody kills a turkey, maybe with a tactic that somebody don't approve of, I don't care, as long as it pulls this person into a culture that's so beneficial to him and his family. That is what the Chucks have done. That is what inevitably, in pursuit of big trophies, Jack Frost, I can name a million people, they've inevitably done. Sometimes I don't even think they knew they did it, but they did. And so what happens is, you're right, it becomes life changing, because what is that deer's life worth if I just saved another man's life that's going through a very bad drug habit, or maybe he just lost his son and is having suicidal thoughts? That's the strength. That's the happiness that hunting camps bring. That's the pursuit of the wildlife that really doesn't have to need a successful tag field. It becomes clean and fresh to be out in the woods, in the outdoors. And so that is why I think it's important to not be so judgmental on how somebody does it, but just get them into the space. So I do believe in hunter recruitment, not because I want to see more animals killed. I want to see more inevitable. The same reason, a preacher or an evangelist talks about Jesus Christ. It's an opportunity to maybe change your life, and hunting will change your life. It will give you a different approach to things. And so you're right, life changing.
Guys, if you run any kind of supplement for your deer, which you absolutely should, there are things that deer need. And I have found that when I run supplements for my deer, it keeps them on my property so they don't go wandering off onto other properties looking for that thing that they're needing. And so I have just dove fully into running minerals and protein for my deer all year long. Buck Bourbon does supplements and attractants really, really well. Whether you're looking for a long-range attractant like the 110 proof, or whether you're looking for a feed that you can run all year long in a feeder, or even just on the ground in their barrel proof, Buck Bourbon has what you need. I can tell you story after story of going onto a new 500-acre piece, dumping out some long-range attractant, and deer just coming into it. Guys, it will make a difference in the way that you see your deer come in. So, guys, I would highly encourage you to check out Buck Bourbon. You can use code HUNTING101 in all caps to get 15% off. But I would just encourage you, no matter what, to start running some sort of supplement for your deer. It'll have a happier, healthy herd. You'll keep them on your property more, and you can better manage those deer. Guys, go check out Buck Bourbon. Now, I also think that, a lot of guys are so worried about, like you said, things not being done the way they think they should be done. It's your job. It's you go back to the preacher evangelist mentality. A preacher evangelist, they cast their vision for what a moral standard is. It's your job as a mentor to cast your vision for moral standards and to teach that young hunter moral standards, to teach that young hunter, hey, listen, if a doe's got 2 fawns with milk on her lips, we're not going to shoot her. You can, it's legal, but we're not going to, we want those fawns to be able to grow up and survive. Or vice versa. I don't know why it's become this big deal, but so many different things on turkey reaping. Well, whatever your view on it is, it's your job to cast that vision of moral standards onto the hunters that you're recruiting, or through social media. You say, well, I don't have one-on-one hands-on time with people. Cast that vision through social media. Cast that vision through the way you handle yourself, and you will impart those morals on other young hunters. If you're one of those guys who thinks crossbows are of the devil, then you should be the one that is casting that vision of moral standards onto the next generation of hunters. That it's on you to teach them what your vision for hunting is. So yeah, I absolutely think you're right, but you hear testimonies all the time of people. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting Brandon Waddell, who is the founder of Mountain Archery Fest, the big 3D shoot that has the world record course and all that stuff. But, he talks about being in like a super dark place with drugs and alcohol, and then somebody put a bow in his hands and his life changed forever. And, it's that type of story where you're like, man, that guy that put the bow in his hands not only changed his life for hunting, but changed his life for addiction and for divorce and for, you name it, literally changed his life forever because he was willing to say, hey, would you like to learn how to shoot a bow? And that's what I think we need to get back to, man.
100%. Very well said, Dylan. I 100% agree, because that's the bigger picture. And I think those that get caught up in how, what with, what the score, there's nothing wrong with that. First of all, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But if you get caught up and you think that's it, and you're living your life and hunting just for that, you will quickly become more depressed than the people you're trying to condemn. The most scary thing that I could ever have is a lonely, dusty trophy room without friends to share it with, and people
Yeah.
sit around and laugh about how we obtain. So the trophies aren't these dead stuffed animals that's in styrofoam, that's cured and salted, and that really are dead. They're gone. They're just a corpse. They're just some antlers. My wife don't love me anymore for them, nor do my friends. Certainly we can all gain respect from our trophy rooms, but inevitably it's the adventures and how we treated people along the way and the memories we made. And so, that's everybody's bright spot or dark spot is when you think back on your childhood and you think about something you did with your pawpaw, something you did with your best friend. It could have been the simplest things, building an old BMX track. It could have been building an old fort, taking a BB gun and going to hunt squirrels in the neighborhood. Some of them mischievous. Making memories is what it's about. And certainly being able to tag some big animals is part of those memories made. But, I had a good friend, Jimmy John, who's got the sandwich company. He's obviously a billionaire and he's made a lot of money and he's done a lot of things for a lot of organizations and he's pumped a lot of money. And if you're a friend of Jimmy, it's not uncommon for Jimmy to call you and say, "Hey, dude, I'm going to pick you up on my global jet and let's fly to the Bahamas right now and go fishing and stay on my yacht." Well, you get there, you might can buy a pizza or some chicken or something, but what are you going to buy Jimmy John? And how are you going to help out? You can't even attempt to be generous and say, "Hey man, let me at least buy fuel." You can do that if you go bass fishing with your buddy. Like, "Hey man, if we're going to use your Phoenix or your Ranger boat, certainly expensive boats," you
Yeah.
can say, "Hey, let's fill this boat up and, ice down the cooler with some water and Gatorade." But you can't offer to fill up the rocket for Jimmy John. I mean, my guy's like, "Okay, yeah,
You want me to buy you a sandwich? I can buy you a sandwich.
yeah, exactly. So what can you do?" And I said, "Jimmy, man," I said, "maybe I'm like the Native American culture to where I like when I get a gift to at least give a gift." And I said, "And I don't feel like there's much I can do other than if you get loud in a bar, I can have your back and give you some loyalty." And I said, maybe, like for instance, there was another friend named Eric Dunn's the same way. He's so generous. Those guys have everything. You can't buy them a gift. I did kill two big, huge timber rattlers. They're both big guys, like 6-foot timber rattlers, and I made them a rattlesnake skin belt, which is really cool. I had to get a pretty big snake to fit around them boys. So that was a cool gift, a $200-300 piece belt. But Jimmy said something I thought was pretty profound. He said, "Michael, let me tell you something." He said, "Chocolate cake is good, but it ain't no fun to eat it alone. You want to see somebody else's facial reaction, see them enjoying it too." And that stuck with me, man, where Jimmy is generous, but he don't want to enjoy these things alone. Hunting's the same way. I mean, you can be in pursuit of your biggest animal, but if you're doing it alone and you can't share it and other friends can't be excited for you, it really didn't accomplish anything. And so it inevitably hunting trophy animals is a personal goal. If you think anybody's going to care that much more about it past you, you're going to probably be in a depression. But inevitably taking these trips and enjoying a good hunt and doing it together, creating a goal, whether it's a big animal or just an animal for table fare. When you do that and you do it as a team, you do it with your friends, that will always stick in your mind and it will never leave you, man. And that's what makes it special, is those memories made.
Well, it's funny because I went through this little life, I don't know what you want to call it. You can't call it midlife crisis, but when I moved from Arkansas to Kansas, I started acquiring all this land. I was a 22-year-old kid, but I'm like, I want that piece of ground, and I'm getting all these leases, and I'm not sharing them with nobody. I'm like, these are my leases. They're hard to get. They're to come by. Don't tell nobody where you hunt. Don't show nobody where you hunt. Where'd you kill that at? None of your business. Shut up. Just my piece of ground. Don't worry about it. Well, then I figured out a couple years in, I'm like, man, this kind of sucks. Like, I'm kind of tired of not, growing up in Arkansas, you share these pieces with your buddies and you're like, dude, the big 8 just came in, and you can tell these stories and they know what you're talking about. Well, when you live life, so it's all about my deer and I got to kill the biggest, baddest. That's where I hunt. when you turn into that, then you don't get to share the stories. You don't get to laugh. You don't get to tell them about the deer that came in because they don't know what you're talking about. And so the last few years I've been changing the way I do things. If a new piece of ground comes up, I'll find a buddy. I'm like, hey, you want to come on this lease with me? I want to share this with you so we can, go out and hang stands together and run cameras together and share the stories of the deer we almost had, but we didn't. And I want that with people. And so I've completely changed the way I do things. But also my two favorite trophies are the two smallest. And I'll tell you, Michael, one of them is tiny. I'm talking 60 inches. But I was with my boy and a deer comes in and my boy's 4. And I had spent all summer with him. I'm like, I tried really hard to like make him think he's helping a lot. And so, when hanging stands and putting cameras out and all these things, I'm like, dude, I need your help, dude. We got to go do this. And so he was invested in these deer. And so, we're sitting there and this little bitty deer comes out. I mean, I'm talking, just a little bit. And that deer comes out and my son was so excited. And I argued with myself for so long. I'm like, dude, I only got one tag in Kansas. I'm not punching a year and a half old deer. But then I'm like, you know what? I look down at him. I look at the deer and I look down at him and the dude is just pumped, and I shoot the deer and he goes, Dad, we got our deer. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about, and my son said, can we put it on my wall? Can I put it on my wall? And I'm like, you absolutely can. And now like people walk around my house and like, why in the crap did you shoot that? And I'm like, because my son wanted me to. And now we have a story. And he tells people all the time, he's like, my dad shot a deer and we ate his body. And I'm like, yeah, we did, buddy. And so
that makes me feel good, man.
But going back to exactly what you said, man, when it's all about just trying to kill the biggest, best deer, man, we miss a whole lot of memories along the way.
We do. And like I said, I don't think either of us are trying to knock trophy hunting. We're not. I mean, I'm all for it. I think, there's just so much more. And I think you have to get past it and the adventures and have those experiences like you did. But you're right. Your son, just like you told the story with so much passion and emotion, he's going to be telling that story when he's your age to his kids. Let me tell you about me and my dad. And you said something also important there. You said, we got one. He was just as responsible, even though all he was doing was almost being seen with those eyes wide open because he was staring.
Yeah.
And that was the way it was. I remember, anybody who grew up in the South and say the early 80s hunting, late 70s, early 80s, deer hunting has just become pretty popular. We just started having sustainable, good deer populations. There was a lot of deer and there was some pretty good deer, but everybody was deer hunting. I remember meeting up at my Uncle Morgan's barn and we would walk back through there, be 5 or 6 of us. And if somebody shot, man, it wasn't one person hunting. We were hunting. And when you're reporting a store or breakfast, people say, hey, man, did y'all have any luck? They wouldn't say, did you have any luck? They'd say, did y'all have any luck? And you would always respond with, yeah, man, we got one. We got a 6-pointer and a 7-pointer. We did. We got 2 this morning. And there's 7 of you. And say, oh, yeah, Dylan and Uncle Morgan got one. And so it was an experience that even though it had nothing to do with we were half a mile apart in different stands across this countryside, but it felt like it was a we deal. And I think as we grow, we set these goals. And even when I think about bow hunting, Dylan, people that get really frustrated. And another thing to kind of rekindle that you touched on earlier, when you're talking about, say, if somebody can't stand, maybe it's crossbow hunting, or let's just say somebody hates turkey reaping. Dude, first of all, I respect the fact that they don't like it. That's completely fine and natural. But the way you get somebody to understand, maybe to get away from a certain thing or to not use a certain thing, is through love and showing them that your way is more fun. If you can't show them that it's more fun and meaningful and maybe more beneficial, then you're going to lose it. Then it just sticks on where you're just a dick and you don't want me to do it because you don't want me to kill something that you can kill your way. And so what it becomes more narcissistic than it does even judgmental, which is more bad for the hunting space for this person to be
100%.
narcissistic than judgmental. And then they're certainly both. And so, for instance, I love my passion is a bow and arrow. This year, I even took a recurve out and I shot a doe and I put it on YouTube. And man, it really did well. A lot of people liked it. And I was like a kid, man. It was the first deer that I'd ever killed with a recurve. And it was just a big old Georgia doe. And man, it was truly unbelievable. I felt like the kid who just got into bow hunting again. But bow hunting in general with a compound vertical bow and now recurve, I truly love it. I have a lot of passion for it. However, I didn't start bow hunting. What got me into bow hunting was a 30-06 Remington 742. What got me into playing high school baseball and trying to hit somebody that was a talented pitcher was a T-ball and a T-ball bat. Chipper Jones didn't start with a wooden bat. He started just like the rest of us, hitting off a tee. Most bow hunters that are very good, even Chuck Adams, started with a gun, with a rifle. Most of us started with a Red Ryder, pellet rifle. And then we start realizing that, wait a minute, I need a little more challenge. I'm getting better. At this. I want we all don't sit around and play, Space Invaders right now. If you play video games, you're going to get something that's going to make you think. You don't sit around, choo, choo, choo. It's evolution. And so the people that's on past this have to be understanding that some people need to be fed this in love and with a moral compass that, like you say, shows them why they should try a different avenue. Yeah. And just a small nudge and reminder in the right way. If you have a passion, like I got buddies that rifle hunt a lot. I still rifle hunt and pick up a rifle every now and then. But I'll remind them, like, dude, you know how fun that was killing that deer with that rifle? You should try it when you get them 30, 40 yards and get them with a bow and arrow. Oh, dude, I don't know if I'll ever be good enough. Like, you can do it. Come over to the farm. We'll try to get a doe. And all of a sudden, they don't even want to hunt other than with that bow and arrow. So it's done the right way. I'm not going to say, man, sissy, you must be drinking Bud Light and then in transition to be sitting here doing all this crap. What's wrong with you, boy, hunting with a rifle? That ain't what nobody wants to hear. Look, I'm as hard as anybody, man. I come from an era of people where we were almost bullyish. We picked on each other hard. I'm talking about hard. And people listening in the older generation, that's what we did. If you wasn't picked on and rode hard, you wasn't liked. And so, but even that, I'm not going to judge somebody by tactic. I'm going to show them like, hey, did you enjoy that? And they're always going to say, yes. I'm going to say, dude, if you enjoyed that, wait until you take a compound bow. And then those who I'm at Pope and Young Convention are telling me, Waddell, I've seen you do a lot with that compound. Boy, you done killed some big elk and got you some good deer. You ought to take a recurve, man. Have you ever hunted with a recurve or, a traditional bow? And I'm like, man, a little bit. I've shot them. I don't know much about them. Like, man, get into it. And then all of a sudden you'll do it and you're like, gosh, they're right. But they never told me I was a punk, because, nice bull in New Mexico, compound, shooting 300 feet per second, sissy. They don't. Somebody will. And so I just to retouch on what you said earlier, I think that is correct. We can win people over more by love and showing them an adventure that might be more exciting than one they're pursuing, whether it's a tactic, whether it's a certain weapon, whether it's a certain way they're going about it. So I think that's what good ambassadors do. They encourage people to do things that might be a little bit out of their element because we once was out of our element. I remember sitting in a tree stand one time in Georgia, holding a compound bow and having every arrow I shot standing, under a persimmon tree, and the 6-pointer I was shooting at was still there. My dad run them off when he come to get me. I thought this was impossible. You can't kill a deer. Fred Bear, he had some smoke and mirrors. There's no way he was killing these animals with a bow and arrow. And then finally I started doing it and I'm like, oh my goodness. So anyway, long vent on how I feel about that. Love and understanding can help get people a long way.
So are you going to stick with the recurve? You pulling it out more this year?
I might. I kind of got still a little selfish bone in me because, like, you're talking Kansas, when I'm finally there and that joker's standing there at 30 yards, I feel confident what I can do with that compound. So I'm still a little selfish to where I really want to fill that tag, but I definitely think I will. I definitely think, especially in the South, first of all, I'm not that good at it. So I definitely want to hone my craft a little bit before I step into some bigger animals. I want to be, pretty ethical and as efficient as you can be. I mean, efficiency is a key word in recurve hunting because it's so easy to flub a shot, to miss or wound. So but I did find it so fun. And there was a certain spirit that come over me. Maybe it was the spirit of Ishi, but it's funny. Even that, I think I even said that. I was like, dude, now I know what Ishi was talking about. I know what Pope and Young was talking about. And of course, a lot of haters got on YouTube. That's not Ishi. He wasn't hunting with a recurve of that. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
Yeah.
I was like, but I felt like this youth about me when I took it. So yeah, I guess the question to answer would be yes. I definitely think I would be. Matter of fact, I got a brand new Hoyt Satori that I could have bought a small farm in Kentucky for. That thing cost sitting over here that I'm excited about. More expensive than my compounds, you know. And so I'm excited to get with T-Bone, who is our kind of archery guru, and getting better at it and just understanding, because it's pretty technical. You think it's fundamentally, you think it's way simpler than tuning and shooting. It's actually, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, just in my little bit of going into it, it's pretty technical, is to get these bows tuned good, to find the right arrow, the right flight, to get the riser and everything working right, and the string retention. I'm saying things that don't even make sense, but
Well,
it ain't just.
I tell people
Yeah.
compounds is a science. Like, you just look at the formulas and plug it in, and it's going to work. Whereas traditional bows is an art. Like, you just got to play with it and figure out what arrow that bow likes, and how that arrow likes to be fletched, and what brace height that bow likes to be at, and it's just an art. And so sometimes art takes a lot more time than, looking at a cam chart on a recurve or on a compound saying, oh, well, I need to set it at, 27.5 inches and crank it to 70 pounds. And I'm going to shoot a 300 spine arrow with 125 out front, because that's what this says, and so sometimes it's just playing around with it and figuring out what it likes, man.
Yeah, when you're sitting out there with a guy who's, good at traditional archery, and just like I've experienced that, I'm out there shooting like, Waddell, take a turn out of that string on, do this. I'm like, what is that going to change? And then it's like, okay, now that's a lot better. I'm like, well, wow. So you're right. That's a good way to describe it. It's an art. It's certainly an art.
So let me ask you this. If you had to guess, what would you say your average shot distance on a deer is with your compound?
I would say average. I would say probably 30, 40 yards right now.
Really?
Yeah. I think if you say, when I say average, I would say if you went to the further shot and to the closest shot, and then you said, okay, I killed 7 nice deer this past year, and then you put them all into the formula, one maybe being at 55 yards, some of them being at 20, 15 yards, and the other being at 30, 40. I think on average, I would say 29 to 35 yards on average. I seem to use that sacket pin a lot, that 30-yard pin. I desire a top pin every time. And with that, though, I'm not afraid at all to hesitate at 50 or 60. If that's the opportunity, especially with my compound and with today's rangefinders, with the ARC technology, with the precise ranging and the ability of what you can shoot, our broadheads, our arrows. I think there's tremendous opportunity. However, as good as you can be prepared, I still prefer a top pin, 15, 20 yard shot. I love that shot, but I don't get them that often, except in certain places. Kansas, I usually can get a pretty close shot. But some of these places, man, when they're transitioning, coming through hardwoods, especially elk, I would say elk, I would say it's definitely further. I'd say that's more 40, 50 yards is my average shot on most bull elk. But man, I love it. I love it. I really do. And that's being realistic. I think a lot of people would push that and exaggerate it. I hear people say, oh man, he wasn't but 80 yards. That's still a long way, man. That's a long way with a bow and arrow. And so I don't know. Back in the day when you talk about those old timers, I would say, 20 and out to 40 was about max range. And I say now you're very modern, really, really good at the craft archers. I think they're pushing that past what they really want to admit, even on social media. But I think the distances have become way far, because you know exactly the distance, you know exactly the trajectory, you know exactly what the penetration power is, your arrows. It becomes like combat. You know your range effectively. And if you know yourself and your equipment, and how you can handle that equipment, it gives you a lot more opportunity than you did back in the day of Fred Bear, actually.
Well, the reason I ask, because believe it or not, your average is higher than most. Because if you look at Pope and Young, average is 17 to 24 yards. So when I
Wow.
look at that, I'm like, man, so you're telling me the biggest animals taken with a bow are all taken within a range that I can effectively shoot a recurve. And so then it was just like, man, why do I not shoot my recurve more? And
Yeah.
so I have turned about 90% shooting a recurve. I still enjoy my compound, of course, but I 90% of what I do is with a recurve. Now there are those hunts like last year I shot a bear and never found it with my recurve, and it wasn't really a bad shot. I just never found the bear. And there's those types of hunt where you're like, man, I spent 10 stinking days in Idaho and all this time and money to not kill it. If I'd had my compound, it'd have been dead, easy.
Yeah.
But you can't think like that,
No.
because if you start thinking like that, well, then it's just an ongoing process of well, when you make a bad shot with your compound, it's like, God, if I just had my rifle, this deer would have been dead easy. And then you go back to your rifle and, lo and behold, you're going to make a bad shot there. And then where do you go? You know what I mean? So you have to just, it goes right back to what we talked about in the beginning. You have to just say, you know what? I had an opportunity. I messed up, but I'm going to learn from it and move on and get better.
Absolutely. I think that's the best way to look at it. You definitely got a good attitude on it, but you're exactly right. Because I think too, what you find in those yardages, and I can probably attest to this, I'm actually probably on the edge of too aggressive as a bow hunter. Meaning there's no telling how many of the deer that I shot at 45 yards, had I had a little more patience, I might have probably got them at 17. And so I'm kind of, I always say, and it always gets controversy when I say it, but I always try to hunt like I'm poaching. And what I mean by that, I try to say, I got to get in there and get out. I'm not going to get this opportunity. So I'm not looking at, I'm not banking on tomorrow. I'm banking on opportunity at hand. And a lot of people will. They're like, oh man, I'm 2 days into a 7-day hunt. Well, I'm looking at the first day. If that deer I want, I'm trying to get an arrow. If he comes by me at 50, 60 yards, I'm going to try to shoot him. But a lot of times you will find that so many of those deer probably would have wandered back through closer. They might have pushed that doe a little closer. They might have finally come to nibble on a little corn that was legal there in Kansas. And so you're right. I can see where that average would be lower than that. But I find myself probably a little too more aggressive. So for me to be a recurve hunter right now, if I dedicated just to that, I think I would be really pleased with what I would find and what I would learn in patience, because it forces you. Because a recurve, I caught myself in, I remember this doe that I shot. It was out there about 28 yards, Dylan. And this, you're a recurve hunter. And I'm like, man, I'm sitting here thinking, come on in. Then it hit me. I'm like, she is in, but she's 28 yards. And finally it circled and got there about 18 yards and I shot her. But looking at her at 30 yards, it looked like it was a 60 yard, because I've shot enough to know that there's a lot could happen. And so it makes you more patient, it is. And so there's going to be a lot that you're like, oh man, I almost had it. And you're going to miss some opportunity. I think you're definitely going to have some bucks and bear that slide by you that don't come right to the perfect spot. But that is part of it. That is part of the experience as well. And so I think for me, I'm in that place because even though I'm kind of a natural want to kill, I do have a little blood in my veins. I'm not going to lie. A lot of people would try to not say that, but I still enjoy killing something. So I'm getting to that point though, now that I'm 50 years of age. I've done a lot. I got a lot of animals. I filled a lot of tags. I'm fine with not getting it, if that makes sense. And I say that, but as soon as it gets by, I am pouting and just over there at dinner and acting like a little old spoiled kid that didn't get a toy, for Christmas. I had him. I don't know why I'm messing around with this recurve. So if I'm being honest with myself, that's probably all my emotions when it comes to that. But yeah, the recurve is an amazing, I don't think there's no better feeling. And I would like to do that. I would like to get a nice buck with a recurve, because I feel like that I could really give a Tarzan yell that you would hear wherever you're hunting. Like, oh, Waddell just got a nice buck with his bow. I heard the Tarzan yell out through the jungle.
Before we go, man, I gotta ask you, where did the name Rue Rue Riley come from?
Oh, dude, that is the best. That goes back to Blake Shelton's story, man. So yeah, this just proves I'm a little bit of a bullshitter and enjoyed my time with some of these adventures. But yeah, we were at a karaoke bar, and this particular karaoke bar, Red Akins was there. There's a couple times Rue Rue Riley. I can't remember the exact day it was invented, but the one I remember the most is in Dothan, Alabama, when Blake Shelton and I and I want to say Daryl Singletary, who's God bless his soul, he's on up in heaven now, and Red Akins. We went to this little karaoke bar to grab a cold beer and some chicken wings. And anyways, we were in there. It didn't take long for people to start looking and saying, "Hey, that's Blake Shelton. That's Red Akins. Is that Daryl Singletary?" And so quickly, there was a few people. This was in the Realtree Road Trips era. There was a few people that recognized me as who I was, and the Realtree Road Trips, the Road Trips guy, But on average, Road Trips had just been on air for a year. Most people were seeing Blake and they know them, so they're like, "Well, who are you?" And so just completely pulled it out of my butt. I said, "I'm Rue Rue Riley." And I'm like, I'm an artist too. And so every time I would go up there and sing karaoke, which I cannot sing, I would go and I would, "Every rose has its thorn, rue, 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 yeah." And I'd end it like that every time. And so when we left this karaoke bar, 5 o'clock somewhere, they asked, would we sign the banner, 5 o'clock somewhere karaoke? And Blake Shelton signed it. The artist that was there signed it, and I signed it too, but not Michael Waddell. I signed it Rue Rue Riley. So after that, even to this day, sometimes Blake will go somewhere and say, "Hey, dude, you gonna go as Waddell? You gonna go as Rue Rue Riley?" I said, "Man, I don't know." So that's the beauty of some of these country artists. You can always be an artist that quick, because if they know, you can just be that guy. If you're hanging and laughing with them, you can become an artist. So yeah, single guys, man. If you got some country music buddies, if you want to go to CMA Fest, that's the time to do it. Just be one of those artists and just become an artist. You don't have to sing, just pretend to be one.
That's funny. So Michael, what's your hunting 101 field note? Your tip that a listener can take and put in their back pocket and make themselves a better hunter with?
My number one when it comes to hunting, I think a lot of people would put a lot of technical aspects on how to find game, where to hunt, what kind of funnel or pocket or food source or area. But I would say no matter how good a position you're in, those are things that you can get in a textbook or on YouTube or on hunting shows, and you can learn it all, listen to podcasts. And that's the number one things most people will give you as tips on how to find the game and how to grow the game and how to feed the game and how to make sure you got your stand set up to get the game. But what gets left out so much, Dylan, is the art of filling that tag. I mean, when it's come time, all this has come together. And what you read about funnels, what you read about a food source, it all is working. And here it comes, a big old huge Iowa or Kansas buck. And he's walking in there. Now your heart's beating whether you got that recurve or whether you got that compound. Here it is. He's about to give you maybe a 20-yard shot. He might give you a 30-yard shot. And so now, if your craft and killing isn't that good, you're going to be heartbroken and it's going to torment you. So I would say the number one tip I would give somebody is to take your time, get an effective range on where that deer is, pull back, try to remember to aim, and always aim top of the heart, to hold lower than what you initially would think when you're shooting at 3D archery, especially as you talk about recurve. I mean, almost with a recurve, you're trying to shoot under them effectively, especially if they're, say, 25 yards. But with a compound, to try to laser focus on shooting that deer's heart out. And what you will find 99% of the time, you will double lung those deer. You will miss the heart only to find that deer ducked just a little bit. So I always try to tell people to find that range, take your time, even through the heart, your heart beating and all that nervousness, pull back, hold lower thirds on that deer with your archery equipment, and you will be way more successful on making effective kill shots. That's just my opinion and a tip that I try to tell people. The art of killing it. You got to have an art of finding it, but then you got to have the other art of punching that tag. So,
I think that's something that a lot of people just don't fully wrap their mind around. The art of killing. There are some people out there that just flat out kill stuff. Like,
yes, naturally born. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I had a buddy and he said, "Hey, I'd like to get into shooting a recurve. Killed some big deer with my compound. I'd like to get into shooting a recurve." I said, "Let's do it, man." And so I get him a recurve, and dude is shooting absolutely horrible. Like, just flinging arrows every which way. And there's 7 arrows sticking inside the neighbor's barn, and I mean, it's horrible. And I said, "Well, I'm going hog hunting in the morning." He said, "Well, I'd like to come, dude. I'm gonna bring this new recurve." I'm like, better not, And so we go hog hunting, and sure enough, he brings that recurve. And he gets within 15 yards of this pig, and he lets her fly. And I'm talking punch the heart out of this pig. And I'm like, "Are you serious, dude? Like, I saw you shooting last night, and it was garbage. And now you just happen to just torch this pig." And so I just started thinking, I'm like, well, maybe he got lucky. Well, then he tells me, he says, "Well, I've kind of decided to only still hunt this year in Kansas." And I'm like, "You're going to still hunt whitetails in Kansas?" And he says, "Yeah. And I think I'm gonna do it with that recurve you got me." And I'm like, "Dude, no, like you're setting yourself up for heartbreak here, brother."
Yeah.
And sure enough, he calls me opening day. Or no, he texts me opening day. And he says, "I'm 30 yards from a bedded buck." And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." And then he texts me another, like, literally an hour, because he's crawling so slow at this point. He's like 15 yards. And I'm like, "Shoot it." And he says, "Waiting for him to stand up." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me, man." So he calls me, sure enough, later on. He says, "Hey, dude, I shot that buck." And I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, with your recurve, spot and stalk?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Dude, what is going on here?" And then I figured out, I'm like, dude's just he's got that killer instinct. Like,
dude, they are some people, man. It's kind of like in every culture, you got, and then if they put a lot of work into it now, then they get unstoppable. But it's kind of like, you look at some of these athletes or musicians. Some people just have a natural ear, a natural eye for art, and some people have a natural ability, God-given ability, to just close the coffin. And there's people in this industry I know that, I'm telling you, they know more about a whitetail than they know about themselves, but they're just not killers. Some of them.
yeah.
So, and look at that. It's a little bit. Pull it back some. See if it. Dude, that's a nice buck. Are you kidding me? Man, congratulations, bro. What's his name?
Aaron Zeesh.
Aaron Zeesh, man. Congrats, Aaron.
Spot
Dude,
and stalk with a recurve in Kansas. And I'm just like, man, he's just got that. They just go into a different mode. It's almost like, because Aaron is a nut. Like, you're talking about people who goof off. Like, I've been with Aaron, and he wants to shoot a pig. He pulls his pants down so he can shoot it with his butt out. I mean, just weird stuff.
Yeah.
And just a goof. But those type of people, man, they hit that second mode, and it's like, it's time to kill something. Like, it's time to just get it done. And they hit that second mode, and man, it's incredible to watch those guys. I mean, you
those
think
guys, Aaron has it. Those guys, what I think they have is it's almost like a statistical percentage calculator. They know when to, even though they goof off and they're fun, they have that ability to know that now is the time, or this is the time that's about to come. They have that percentage of understanding of when is really game time. They're Tom Brady type people that don't panic, but understand what openings are going to be there and when you got to execute, and they make up for any inability. Maybe some people can shoot a group this tight as your fist, and they're shooting a group that's this big, but I would rather have that big a group if you got that percentage or calculator to know that when can I use my ability to shoot that big, and they seem to succeed. So that is I think you can learn that, but that's some stuff that you either have that instinct in you that you can only make better. But if you don't have it, it takes a lot of work to get it. And some people have it, some people don't. Aaron obviously has it, man. So congrats, Aaron. That's pretty impressive. Actually,
well, those are some of my favorite people to hunt with. Aaron is one of my favorite people to go and hunt with, much like because of what you're talking about. Because there are guys, I've heard that Chuck really isn't fun to share a camp with, because he's not going to goof off. You know, he's not going to, because he's there to kill something all week long. It's kill mode. Like, they don't switch off. You know, it's not. It's when they're in camp, they're looking at maps and they're thinking, where'd that deer come from? Where did he go? I mean, it's all the hunt. But those guys like Aaron are my favorite people to hunt with, because they're going to goof around and have a ball, just like we were talking about sharing camp and having fun with people. But then when it's time to hunt, they flip that switch and let's go kill something.
That's right.
Those are my favorite people, man, for sure.
Aaron would have been the guy in the 1700s in an Indian tribe that would have had the big fancy tent and all the wives, because he had been the one making everybody laugh and killing all the animals and feeding everybody. Yeah.
You're probably right. Well, Michael, what's your big hunt you're looking forward to this year too?
Honestly, I don't have one thing in particular. I'm kind of in a area that, in one way, this will make me sound spoiled, that I'm in the mundane of a revolving cycle of what I really love to do. You know, people are surprised to hear that I really love to hunt turkey. I came off a really good turkey season, hunted with some amazing people, and definitely saw more turkeys get shot than I shot myself, because I was, you know, kind of more sharing these adventures and opportunities to fill some tags. But turkeys and then elk, I love to hunt elk. So I do have an opportunity to go back to the Navajo Indian Reservation and hunt, which I love hunting out there in Navajo country. It's just amazing. Big elk. And going back to Oregon, I'll go back to Utah. So now I find that it's kind of a revolving cycle of the camps and the things that I really love to do. So I'm not as adventurous in the fact that I'm trying a bunch of new things. I'm kind of going back to the tried and true. And I think that's come with age. And now I really know how I like to hunt and what I like to hunt. So I'm just looking forward to that particular year. I was lucky. I did draw a Kansas tag. Nick did not, T-Bone did not, and my dad drew. So Nick and T-Bone are going to be cheerleaders, and me and my dad will be getting after it with my buddy.
Awesome.
So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. I don't have anything in particular, like, dude, you ain't gonna believe it, I'm going to do this. I did go this past spring and get an ocellated turkey down in the Yucatan Peninsula. I'd kind of not did that because I didn't think hunting the turkey would be that fun, because you don't really necessarily work to call them in. They have now developed a little more tactic in how they can call the turkeys in. So I did do that finally, and I can say I got me an ocellated. That's really the main reason I went. I mean, it was a cool adventure. I went down there with Troy Link of Jack Link's Beef Jerky, who's become a great friend, just a great person, and fun to share camp with. I went down there with him and Justin and some of his people that work for him. So that was fun. So I'm more now into kind of going back to the things I really know. I'm not as a more exploration Jim Shockey guy as I once would have been. Now I just love to hunt turkey, nice whitetails, and elk. I mean, it's almost like I have my producer like, dude, are we going to do anything? Are we going back to moose country? Are we going to Africa again? I'm like, man, I mean, we can, but honestly, man, I've been there, done it. I just want to go back and do the things I enjoy the most. You know, it's almost like going to the arcade, put your quarter in Miss Pac-Man. You know what I mean? It's like, I ain't going to play all these other games. This Miss Pac-Man's fun, or, you know, or Galaga, whatever, you know. So I'm definitely dating myself now.
Is there something that you wanted to hunt but never got around to it? I mean, that one species?
The one thing I now want to do really bad, a lot of the big game animals, like the North American big game stuff, and even some of the stuff outside of North America. Like, I'd always want to hunt a Cape buffalo with a bow. I've done that. I've definitely hunted the big moose. You know, I've got 3 really nice Alaska Yukon moose with my bow. Hunted the black, a lot of the black bear, but the one bear that I still want to hunt with a bow and arrow, and I've killed it with a rifle, is a brown bear. Yes. I have killed a brown bear, like I said, but I haven't done it with a bow. So that is one thing I'd like to talk to Jack and Chuck and find a really good spot and do that too. But that, to me, yes, it will be an adventure. It will be a story. But I don't know that a bear hunt, even for a brown bear, will compare to me to, like, say, a week hunting elk in the Rocky Mountains. I just want to say I did it, that I had a chance to be that close to this huge animal and to have the challenge of trying to go through what it needs to happen to maybe get a shot at one. And I think it would be one of those, if I get one, I would be done. But that's one last bucket list animal. Outside of that, man, all the big game animals that I've wanted to pursue, which, man, I've shot a lot, from mule deer, elk, moose, caribou, all the caribou, from bear to, all the animals over in Africa that I wanted to pursue. I've had a chance to do. And so I've been really blessed to do it. And while I'm still young, and I did most of it when I was young. And so brown bear with a bow, but far as like going to get a musk ox, could care less, polar bear, so could really care less. I would rather just watch a good TV show where somebody did it. Maybe that I would spend to go pursue that just to say I got one. I think I'd rather save up and do something I know I would love. So that's kind of how.
Sense. Yeah, coastal brown bear with a bow is like that would be my number one probably right now. And I tell everybody that's probably, if you were to say any hunt you want to go on tomorrow, money's no option or money's no object. Where do you want to hunt? What do you want to hunt? It would probably be coastal brown bear with a bow.
Yeah, me too. I would say that too. And not just brown bear. You're exactly right. Coastal brown bear. The bear I did kill with a gun, I did have my bow. And looking back, man, I should have pursued it with a bow. I had it and I put it down, picked up a rifle. I was on a moose hunt, one of those combo hunts. You never hear going on those combo hunts and get it all. And so I would tell somebody, if you're going on a combo hunt, moose, brown bear, concentrate on one or the other. Well, I ended up like 4 days in, got a really nice moose with my bow. And they said, hey, man, we've been seeing some bears. So I thought there's no way. So we flew in, set up camp, was going to spend our time, looking for bear. And just luck would have it, right out of the tent, there is a big, nice brown bear. And there was a salmon stream there, but the bear he was kind of off the salmon stream a little bit. And he was up in the hills in a berry patch, and he was foraging on berries. And so, and it looked pretty open, from where I was at. So me and the guide I was with said, hey, man, let's just get the rifle and kill this sucker. So I did. Once I got over there, I'm like, oh, my God, it's way thicker and there's way more cover. I could have slipped right up on this bear, I believe.
Yeah.
So yes, I would love to kill a grizzly bear, but I want that brown bear. I just picture them out in the streams fishing and being on the edge, or maybe stalking up the edge. I have this kind of romantic thought of where I would be. So it's not just to kill a bear. I want that setting of that coastal, like I think.
Absolutely. And that would be my dream hunt. But that's also a great tip about splitting up. Like if you're going on any combo hunt, hog turkey down in Florida, or whitetail antelope in western Kansas, or anything, if it's a combo hunt, focus on one and then switch to the other. Yes. It is so hard to try to jump back and forth between, well, there's an antelope, let's stalk it. Wait, a mule deer just ran by over here, let's go get that one. It's so hard to switch between those two. And last year, that's exactly what I did. I went on a bear elk combo. And so I spent the first 2 nights, because we knew we could just kind of nail down a bear and get that out of the way. Because it was in Idaho, you could bait. And so we're like, well, let's just go sit on the bait the first 2 nights, and then we'll just switch and have the rest of the 7 days to focus on elk. So that's exactly what we did. And that's a great tip, man, because a lot of dudes get caught trying to kill everything at once, and then they don't kill anything. And so fantastic tip, man.
Yeah, I think you got to focus. I think it is a good tip that to be honest with you, a combo is a nice bonus of adventure that you can add to it, but I think you need to stick with your objective first. So if you go on a moose, bear, you probably need to decide which one is more important and focus on that, because it does make a difference. Because
absolutely,
you'll say 14 and 15 days can go by quick, because there's not a bear or animal under every tree in Alaska. You watch these documentaries in these areas that people do, especially Nat Geo, and you'll think it's just, they're everywhere, but they're not. Where you can really publicly hunt, you're not hunting where the grizzly man got eaten. Yeah, I'd love to hunt that spot, where the dude, what is the dude, told him and his girlfriend got ate up. I mean, he was basically, good night, so we're not hunting those areas. These areas are a lot more desolate, and they're a lot more hard to come by animals in some cases. And so, So yeah, when you get that opportunity, it might take you every day of a 15-day hunt to even see a nice moose, much less get it with your bow and arrow. So I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize about some of those type hunts. And so same with, it is hard to kill a good elk with a bow and arrow in a wild chase environment. It is one of the most difficult animals. And so it is nothing to hunt 7 days and only have one or two or maybe no opportunity. It's not uncommon. So
you're absolutely right.
But if you take 2 or 3 days out of there to say go hunt a bear, well, that might have been your elk. It's just hard to measure.
Yeah.
Versus if you get your elk and you got 2 days left to focus on bear, then that's better to me. Or vice versa, or focus on the bear, and then you got the rest of it to hunt the elk. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael, man, thank you so much for coming on, dude. It's absolutely always a pleasure. Again, I think very highly of you because there's not many people in the world that have something negative to say about you. So, man, thank you for all you do in the hunting community. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm excited to watch what you do this fall.
Thank you, buddy. Same to you, Dylan, man. I appreciate what you're doing, man. You're doing a hell of a job, man. And I've enjoyed getting to know you the last several years, and congratulations on all your success. And thank you for having me on, man. I enjoyed chatting with you, man. Some good stuff.
I appreciate it. Guys, if you've been around hunting at all, you've probably heard of a little company called Muddy. I have learned that if it says Muddy on it, I can trust it. From tree stands, ground blinds, trail cameras, to all the accessories. If it says Muddy, it's a name I can trust. I love their tree stands. I love their ground blinds. I love their trail cameras, the new Merge and their Morph cellular trail cameras. They're phenomenal, especially when you pair them up with a solar panel and they last forever. Guys, I would encourage you to check out Muddy for all your tree stands, ground blinds, all the accessories, bow hangers, harnesses, everything tree stands or ground blinds or accessories related. If it says Muddy, I know that I can trust it. Guys, I know the new Rage. The new Rage is these super light tree stands that cost like $400. And I'm like, well, why would I spend $400 on one when I can spend $100 and get 4 tree stands that are all going to perform? They're all going to be safe. They're all going to be comfortable. Guys, Muddy is the gold standard, in my opinion, for what a tree stand and a ground blind and trail cameras should offer you. So, guys, go check them out. They are phenomenal. And I promise you, if you're shopping at a Dick's, Academy, Bass Pro, Cabela's, anywhere, if it says Muddy, I promise you it's a name you can trust. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a fantastic week.